G'day, Ben here from Duck Plain Chicken. Today, continuing on with the Unicorn Perfect Grade by Bandai. And I've done a huge amount of painting. I've painted pretty much all the pieces. I'm almost ready to go. But I thought before we get into assembly, I'd spend a little bit of time just talking about the colours I've chosen and also the process I'm going to go through for panel lining and decals. So start off with the colours that I've used. For the main armour pieces, I've used a combination of two colours because I want to break it up a little bit. It is very white, the unicorn, so I wanted to have a bit of variation in the colours. So I've gone with just a straight white for a lot of it, which is the SMS, and I've just used Surfacer White. I literally just used the actual primer as the colour. So it's a nice clean white, probably a little bit cool, but perfectly fine. For the slightly off-white colour, I've chosen to use Boeing Grey, another SMS colour. And the reason I've chosen this is because it's a little bit warmer. It's a sort of warm off-white, and I think that sort of plays in well to the Psycho frame, which of course is, you know, this kind of hot pink colour. So a bit of warmth in the other panels. And when I get to the point of actually putting all this together, you'll be able to see how I've sort of separated out those different colour panels. So they're the two colours I've chosen for the armour pieces. Maybe a little bit hard to see, but this piece here I've actually finished with a gloss, and the reason I've done that is because I haven't done the panel lining on these ones yet, and I learnt my lesson from the God Phoenix that it is still a good idea to gloss varnish pieces before doing enamel panel lines. You know, I just found with the God Phoenix, the blue, and I did the panel lines, and it got a bit dirty when I was cleaning it up. So the gloss varnish should help alleviate a lot of those issues. It is gloss at the moment. What I will do is put a flat coat on it. So I'll be using SMS Flat Clear, and that's what I've used on all these other pieces. So you can see there's no sort of glare there at all. That's dead flat. So that's the armour. For the fins, I masked off one side, used the Surfacer White. For the other side, I used this Inca Gold, metallic Inca Gold, and this is a beautiful colour to spray down. It's a nice warm gold. It's pretty close to the way the model actually comes, because this part's actually pre-painted in the kit. But it is a beautiful gold colour, and like a lot of these SMS paints, the actual fleck in it is so small you hardly notice it. I should also say that with all the metallics, I've actually thrown a light flat coat over them, and the reason that I do that, I may have mentioned before in other videos, is that I think if it's still got a little bit of a metallic sheen but it's not super shiny, for me anyway, it just makes it look more to scale. So that's why I use matte coat even over metallics. A lot of people they like that high gloss, and that's fine, but for me I think it's more in scale with what we're doing. Okay, so the other metals that I've used a combination of 3 metallics, and for different parts of the inner frame and for the weapons. So the first one I've got here, which is probably more obvious on camera how it's different to others, is the stainless steel. So this is a beautiful colour. Again, it's got a little bit of warmth to it. It's you know, and I have dulled this down, so normally it is a bit shinier, but I don't know if you can sort of see that, but it has almost a bit of a yellow or orange warm tinge to it, so that's a really nice one. For a lot of the other parts, and probably the bulk of the inner frame, I've used steel. And when this is flattened down, It gives a nice, you know, satin sort of finish to the metal sheen of it. Again, the metal flecks are so small, so you hardly even see the fleck in it, which is fantastic. So it still has a bit of a sheen to it. And then finally, I've used one, and if we look at all, you know, especially these two here, it's not necessarily clear as to, you know, the differences between these colors, and they're probably they're pretty subtle. But for some of the weapon pieces, I used gunmetal. So gunmetal is a similar color to the steel, but it has a bigger fleck in it. So just something to take note of. But for me, it kind of suits what I'm going to be using it for. So that's sort of the frame bits. Now, a lot of people sort of ask about, you know, why would you paint in a frame when you're never going to see it? And the truth is that for the unicorn, I'm probably not ever going to expose any of the inner frame, just because the way the Psycho frame works and the lighting that I'm going to put into it, it doesn't lend itself to being displayed with its inner frame sort of showing in parts. One of my previous models, which is a perfect grade Zaku 2, I have actually set it up so half of the inner frame's exposed, and it makes it a bit more interesting to put on display. However, getting back to why I do it, it's just because I know it's there. It's the reason why people detail up cockpits and stuff in planes that aren't necessarily all that detail is going to be seen. It's just, you know, personal knowledge and knowing that I've gone to that effort. Okay, so some of the other colours that I've chosen for the blue parts, I have used SMS Blue. Now there is one single red part that I painted, and I have done an enamel wash in here. This is for the bazooka, and I've used Insignia Red, which is it's a nice sort of darker red. It's not super bright, so that was a good one. Also for the ammo packs, I have used Aggressor Blue. Now in the actual model kit prior to being painted, these things are probably a little bit greener. They're probably a bit more of a teal colour compared to a light blue, but I actually prefer this Aggressor Blue colour. And finally, for all these Psycho frame parts, I have put a flat coat on them. And it was just a light misting, but what it does is it diffuses the light that's going to be behind many of these pieces. So it's going to make the effect just a little bit better, I think. So normally these pieces are just clear color, and I think that by putting a matte coat over them, we'll get a bit more light diffusion. I mean, I won't know until I've actually got it all set up and turned on. So that's a little bit about the colors. The next thing I'm going to go through is just the process for panel lining, which I know I've covered before, but just to sort of show it. And I haven't got any footage of me actually painting all those pieces. It was literally hours and hours of painting. I haven't actually counted how many pieces are in this kit, but it was a substantial amount of painting. I think I'm up to about 70 hours on this kit. So if you want me in future videos to show footage of me painting, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know in the comments. But I'm just going to quickly show you again the panel lining technique I use, and also the decals that I've been applying. Normally when I'm panel lining armor pieces, I'll use one of two colors. I'll use the panel line accent color grey or the black by Tamiya, just depending on the color. So normally for lighter pieces I'll use the grey, for the darker pieces I'll use a black. So for these pieces I'm going to be using grey. I'm just going to quickly show you the process that I do. It's a pretty standard process for panel lining, but just to show you the process that I go through, make sure you give this stuff a really good shake. It separates quickly, so you need to shake it quite regularly. And just the other thing you want to do is make sure you wipe off any excess, because it can build up on the side of the, oh, get it in camera, you want to make sure that you want to brush off any excess, because if you get a build up along the stem of the brush, it can just blob down onto your piece and completely ruin it. So the good thing about this stuff is it's nice and thin, and you can actually thin it just with some Tamiya enamel thinner if you need to, you know, if it dries out a little bit. But it's literally just touching it into an area and using capillary action to do all the work. So if I go on the line here, so I've just touched it to an edge and it is just running down that line. You let gravity do the work for you. So if you go over, you can see I've made a mess of this little divot and there's a bit of mess here. That's fine. That's where you come back later with, I use shellite, but you can use Zippo fluid or enamel thinner to come back and clean up those bits of overspill. Now, the smoother the surface, the better the capillary action will work. I'm just going to grab another piece here. And hence the reason why I've used a gloss. So if you use a matte finish, the thinned enamel won't be able to run as smooth, and when you come and clean it up, it might actually sort of blur a little bit, I guess, and you get sort of dirty marks on it like I did with the God Phoenix. So it's literally just going through and touching all the areas where there are little tick marks or little panel lines. Again, just be conscious of sort of taking off all that excess. These are slippery once they've got a gloss on them. I find this process pretty relaxing, somewhat akin to mindfulness, I think, especially if you've got a lot of pieces that you sort of go through and you're doing panel line all on, and it can make quite a difference to the look of your model if you just have the highlighting of those panel lines or those little hatch marks. You know, all these little details make a difference. And really what we're doing is we're just using this wash to accentuate the panel lines where dirt might catch or there might be a bit of a shadow. It's a really old trick. Those who sort of model in the area of military stuff and planes have been doing it for a long time now. And I'd certainly encourage Gundam builders, Gunpla builders, especially new builders, check out what a lot of the military modelers are doing, because they use some techniques which are fantastic and are still relevant to doing Gunpla modeling. So some of the techniques, some of the materials they use, you know, I mean, I've learnt a lot of my tricks from the community of military modelers, guys who do armor and planes. So I don't think you only have to watch, you know, YouTube videos about Gunpla specifically if you're into painting them. You know, try to open your mind a little bit to other areas. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let that dry for probably 20 minutes, half an hour. You want the enamel to be dry enough that when you go to clean it up, it's not just drawing it straight out. So normally for me it's about half an hour, but you know, you can leave it a day and come back to it later if you need to, especially if you've got that gloss coat down. So I'll let these dry and then I'll come back and show you the cleanup process. Okay, so now it's time to clean up these panel lines, so you can see the marks that I've left when I put the panel liner in. And to clean them up, I'm going to use some shellite, but you can use just straight Zippo fluid or enamel thinner. They'll both do the same thing. Now I just decant it into one of these old Tamiya bottles, make it a bit easier to deal with. And I'll have a bit of paper towel, I'll have some cotton buds, and basically I wet the cotton bud with the shellac. I just take the excess off on the paper mat, and then I go through and I'll literally just run it across very gently, but you can see how it cleans it up. You're running the cotton bud over the top because you don't want any of that panel line actually coming out of the recess where you want it to stay. Now I know a lot of people will just cover their pieces using panel line and then go through and clean it up with cotton buds. I find that process incredibly messy, so I like to try and keep it as neat as possible. It just reduces the amount of cleanup that's required, and there you can see it's nice and neat. So if we go into the side here. And the great thing is that if you take out too much, you can always go back in there with the panel line. So when I started out with Gunpla, which was probably back in 2004, I used to just use what a lot of people use when they're starting out, was the markers, the Gundam markers to do panel lines. But I actually find that panel lining with enamel, thin down enamel, is a lot better. So I'm just going to go through the rest of these pieces and essentially do the same thing. So here you can see I've got two little marks along this line here. Just going to brush the cotton bud across. You can see that mark's gone. It definitely makes a difference having the gloss. Now, although an enamel shouldn't bind to a lacquer acrylic, if you've got any kind of rough surface, it just makes it a lot harder for the cotton bud to sort of get in there and clean it out, and so you tend to get sort of scruffy marks on the piece. So by putting that gloss coat down, it just makes it a bit easier for cleanup. Now I'm going to go through and do the rest of the pieces, and once I've done that, the next step is to go through and do the decals. Now normally for a lot of model kits you would put the decals down first. So for example, if you had a decal that went over this panel line, you would put the decal down first, you would put a gloss coat over the top of it to protect it, then you would do the panel lining. Except all the decals that I've checked for this particular kit, none of those decals actually go over any panel lines, so I'm fine to do all the panel lines first. But it just sort of depends on the nature of the kit that you're doing and the nature of the position of where the decals end up going as to whether you need a panel line to go over it or not. So next step, I'll go through all the rest of the pieces that I've got here, clean them up, and then I will take you through the decal process. So time for decals. Now one thing that I do not understand is why Bandai provides stickers for perfect grade kits. It beggars belief. I understand why they would potentially include stickers with waterslide decals, but no waterslide decals being provided with a perfect grade kit. I just don't understand it. Given that for the version car kits, the master grades, you get water slides with those. So what I've had to do, and I've already started applying water slide decals, but what I had to do was buy a third-party sheet. So this is not a Bandai sheet of decals, it's some third party. I bought it off eBay, I think it was, around the time when the Perfect Grade kit was released. And essentially these are a copy of the stickers. Ironically, the text and that sort of thing is actually a little bit clearer on the decals than it is on the stickers, so I'm not sure what's going on there. These aren't the best quality decals, and in fact I need to use quite a bit of microsol to get them to sit nicely, so just be warned if you're buying sort of non-brand name decals, sometimes you can, there's a little bit more work involved. The kit also includes some foil stickers, which are pretty par for the course for Perfect Grades. Usually it's for the cameras on the weapons and the head and that sort of thing. There's a few reflective sheets which I believe are used specifically to reflect the light for the psycho frame. So I'll see as I get through the construction side of things whether I actually use them or not. But today it's all about the decals. So normally when I'm doing decals, especially a kit of this size, I will actually highlight, so you can see the ones that I've ticked off, the ones that I've already done. And that's just so that I can keep a really good track of which decals I've done, which ones I need to do. And for me, I guess it's more of a habit. So aeroplane models I've done in the past that have had lots of decals, I've just found this is the best way to sort of work out where you're up to. So what I'm going to be doing is just start showing an example with the decals that are on this back leg piece here. So this is one of the pieces that is going to have the decals applied to it. I've already cleaned up all the panel lining. It's got a gloss coat on it, so that way we'll hopefully get the decal to sit cleaner without any silvering, where air gets trapped under it and it looks a bit messy. So if I refer to the instructions, I need number 44 and 14. So what I'll do is I'll use a scalpel blade. I need to put my old man eyes on, so again some magnifying glasses. 44. The good thing about these ones, I've actually bought third-party decals for other Perfect Grade kits, but this one's good because the numbers actually match what are in the instructions. That's not always the case. Okay, so we've got 44 up here. Let's just grab one of those. I suspect maybe my blade needs to be replaced. I'll use, got these Tamiya decal tweezers, which are fantastic. And what I'm going to do is dump them in my little tray of water here. Now a lot of people will actually heat their water. I've never found the need to do that. I'm not in a hurry, so usually I just use cold tap water and I haven't had any issues. Using warm water just tends to activate the adhesive on the back of the decal a bit quicker, so it just tends to come off the backing paper a little bit faster if you go that way. So that's 44, now 14. Okay, so this is a little guy here. Sorry, I should make sure I'm on camera. I'm just going to move the tray of water out of the way because I am notoriously clumsy, as you can just see by me knocking the camera. Cut this guy out. And of course the last thing you want to do is spill water all over your decal sheet. And yes, I have done that before. It is not pretty. Now of course the good thing about water slide decals, is that you can position them and you can reposition them if you get them in the wrong spot. So I'm a big fan of water slide decals, and I mean most modelers are. I understand stickers are maybe for younger builders who don't want to go down that path and just want to get stickers on and be set to go. but waterslide decals are certainly a lot better, and you tend to get that flatter, painted on looking finish as opposed to a sticker which always has an edge around it. So, and over time stickers tend to lift and they can leave gummy residue. So yeah, waterslide decals all the way for me. Now, while these two are soaking, it shouldn't take that long. I'm going to grab a toothpick. So a toothpick I generally use to maneuver the decals around. And in fact, I should be able to see whether these are starting to activate or not. A little bit longer. Now I need to get my micro sole and micro set. So I use the micro scale products, micro set, micro sole. I also number them just so that I remember which order they go in. The micro set is, my understanding, you put that down first and the decal will suck right down onto the surface, so it can help to reduce silvering. And the microsol is what you put on afterwards, which helps to dissolve the carrier film a little bit, and so it also helps it to conform to a surface, so like go into gaps and that sort of thing. Now there are lots of different other products like this. There's the Tamiya products, and there's a whole number of them, but essentially they all do similar things. They're just different strengths. I tend to find these two are pretty they're not very strong, so it just means you have to put more applications on, which is fine by me, because some of them tend to be a bit stronger, especially the microsole equivalents out there. They will be a bit more aggressive and you just need to be careful. We end up doing what I did on the God Phoenix, which was melting one of the decals completely, so you just really need to be aware of that. Alright, now as far as applying the decal solutions, I actually have two dedicated brushes which I have tagged microsole and microset, and that way I don't actually bother washing them out. I just know I use the right one for each component. So starting with the microset, and of course I'm just double checking the orientation of the decal. What I'll do is just apply a little bit of this stuff. Now when you've got a gloss surface, it will tend to bead quite a bit, so you just need to make sure there's a little bit there, and that'll help suck the decal down to the surface. Alright, let's see how this decal is moving. See if it's moving off the decal sheet. It's getting there. The good thing about this tray I've got from Wave is that you can actually just bring the decals up like that, so it saves you having to fish around for them or go bobbing for apples for your decals. So that's a good thing. So we can see that decal is moving on the carrier film, or on the backing paper. And then what I'll do is I will try to hold the piece steady and literally take the decal and just gently sliding it off the backing paper, holding it in place with the toothpick. Now this warning is supposed to go in between these two indents here, but that looks a bit close to me, so I'm going to bring it down a bit. Otherwise I think it looks a bit strange. Okay, so we can see there's a lot of got a bit of fluff on there from, and I'll put the gloss coat on. Looks like it's coming off alright. So the next step is to get a cotton bud, and the first step I'm just going to do is sort of dab away a lot of the water that's sitting there. So you can see there's still a little bit of moisture, but it's starting to settle down. And then it's just a matter of sort of moving it around so it's centered. Make sure it's lined up. And I mean, a lot of this stuff, quite often you're just eyeballing it. And if you don't get it perfect, I tend to find that most of my models have, you know, a number of decals that aren't perfectly lined up. Alright, so what I want is a clean cotton bud. And what I'm going to do is just roll it across to remove all the moisture that's sitting underneath the decal. I'm applying a little bit of force because you want to squeeze it out. Just do it a couple of times. Okay, and see if we can focus. There we go. So you can see that's reasonably flat. You can still see the edge of the carrier film around the decal, and what we're going to do now is apply some of the micro sol to help soften that. And I will do a number of coats of this. Just like I said before, it's a little bit, it's not that strong, but what you want to do, try and get this on camera, just give it a light coat over the actual decal itself. You don't want to get it all over your paint job, you just want to get it sort of over the decal and just past the edge of the carrier film. And so what that'll do is capillary action will draw the microsol under the decal where it can go. And once you've done that, you don't want to touch it, because what happens is depending on the nature of the decals, they may wrinkle up a little bit, and what that's doing is because essentially it's a chemical reaction to kind of melt the decal a little bit. And so you don't want to go touching it because the decal will be really soft and it'll break really easily. So you're better off just letting it sort of air dry and yeah, take it from there. So once I've gone to, once I've sort of done this a couple of times with the microsol, I will then put a matte coat over the top of the lot of it, and that helps to flatten it right out. So I'll quickly show you an example of one that I've already completed. So here we have the one of the shoulder plates, and you can see that after a couple of coats of microsol and a flat coat, you can hardly tell it was a decal. It looks as though it was literally, you know, transferred directly onto the armor piece. So, you know, taking your time with this stuff. If I move this one an angle, you can see a slight gleam to that one, but really once it's sitting on the shelf you won't notice that at all. But a lot of the bigger ones, you know, I tend to do a bit more work on, because it's really important that they look as though they're just literally painted on. As soon as you see that edge of the decal, it sort of takes away from the illusion of the fact that this is, you know, like something that actually existed. So that's basically my process of doing decals. I know I've shown it before, but I'm showing it again. The next video I'll be putting together will be the assembly of the whole lot, and I haven't yet decided, but I think I will probably film most of it, and it'll just be me talking through the process of putting all the painted pieces together. So I'll catch you later.